question posed today for board work is, if the Packers are favored 20-1 against the Vikings, what does this mean? Well, after I've recorded your answers and taken them, 20-1 odds means that the Packers are favorites to win. This means that the Vikings have a 1-20 odds of winning. This is a relationship of odds. What this is, or what the board work represents, is ratios. Today, we are going to cover ratios in technology, which can be found in levers, gears, and mechanical advantage. When we break down ratios, we're going to break down a few different things. We're going to break down definition of ratios, expression of ratios, examples of ratios, relationships in ratios, and comparing and simplifying ratios. Students, you will be expected to express ratios in 3 different forms, understand what ratios do, and correctly label a simple machine with a given ratio. Alright. Ratios are the relationships between 2 or more numbers that help make comparisons. For instance, the odds were 20-1 that the Packers were going to win. The Packers had the 20 odds, the Vikings had the 1. Relationships include inputs and outputs. Packers were the first, Vikings were the second. Alright, to break this down in numerical form, this ratio here, 8-1, is expressing a relationship. That means for every 8, there is going to be 1. So, the question is, what's the comparison? What I just said, 8-1. So what are ratios, folks? Ratios are comparisons of 2 or more numbers in a relationships. And what do? They give us humans a better understanding of how things compare. For example, we've got an apple orchard and a pear orchard. Little Jimmy goes out to collect some apples. He brings back 20 apples, and 20 pears. So in a sentence, this would read, for every 20 apples, there's 10 pears. So 40-1 odds means what? For every 40, there's going to be 1. Alright, gang. Next, we're going to move to expression of ratios. Ratios can be written as fractions. Ratios can be written using the word 2, and ratios can be written using a colon. Alright, first we're going to break down fractions. Little Jimmy right here is on his skateboard, and he's paying attention to his clock. He traveled 26 miles in 2 hours. The ratio, when you write it as a fraction, would be 26-2. You're in the kitchen. You've got so many ounces. You need to convert it to a pound. It's 16 ounces per pound, 16-1. So this is the first way that ratios can be written, and it is in fractions. Ratios written with 2 is the second way ratios can be expressed. You have 10 pears to 3 oranges. Notice 10-3. The second example is showing a lower number than the second, which we haven't seen yet, and that is correct to do in ratio form. So for every 3 cows, there are 64 goats. And what you need to pay attention to when you think about ratios, asking yourself what the question poses. So, how many cows to how many goats? 3 to 64. Lastly, but not least, this is the one that we see most practical in technology. This is the way levers, gears, mechanical advantages often expressed. So I'm going out fishing and I'm just having a killer day. 1 cast, fish. 2 casts, nothing. 3rd cast, fish. That ratio right there is a 3-2. And then you ask yourself, how many casts per fish? Well, 3-2. Another note is that per is equal to colon. So when I'm saying how many casts per fish, that's just saying break that down into a ratio. Break it down. 3 casts per 2 fish. All right, so touching base on what we've all covered so far. Ratios are a comparison between 2 or more numbers. Ratios can be written as fractions. Remember the fraction where the guy was on his skateboard and he was timing how far he got in 26 miles? It was 26 over 2, or in this instance, it's 10 to 4. And then the word 2, so you're writing a sentence about the 10 fish to the 4 fishermen. And lastly, the one that we see in technology the most, colon, which is 10 to 4. All right, the last lesson that we touched on was levers. And I'm not trying to make you guys calculate mechanical advantage with this. I'm just trying to break down ratios as a whole. So you don't have to figure out anything. All I'm asking you is, what's the ratio of D2 to D1? D2 is listed as 7 feet, and D1 is listed as 3 feet. So what we've learned before, you've got to ask what the question posed. The question posed, what is the ratio of D2 to D1? Therefore, you start with D2 first, and then move on to D1, excuse me. So it could be written as 7 to 3, 7 fraction 3, or 7 colon 3. All right, this is the same kind of thing that we did last time. I'm not looking to calculate mechanical advantage or radius turning. I'm just looking for you to be able to read this picture and figure out the ratio. So what this question is asking is, what is the radius of the wheel to the axle? So you break it down, look at it. Radius is from here to there, so that is 5 listed right there. And then the radius of the axle is here to there, 1 inch. The ratio is expressed as 5 to 1, 5 fraction 1, or 5 colon 1. All right, this is going to be touched on later on in our lessons, a few more days coming up. But this is a gear ratio, which is very common in technology. This right here, it will get way touched on more later, but it is just asking for the driver gear to the driven gear. This could be like a bicycle example, and it's asking driver gear, to driven gear, and there's 60 teeth on the front and 30 teeth on the back, so it can be expressed as 60 to 30, 60 over 30, or 60 colon 30. All right, next. That big or too much information to comprehend, and sometimes simplification needs to occur. So that right there can also be expressed as 2 to 1, 2 colon 1, or 2 over 1. So pretty much what you got to do is just break it down. All right. Now, gang, listen up. This is a very important concept. This 1 to 7 is not equal to 7 to 1. That is completely wrong. That is like writing that the Vikings have a 20 to 1 odds. You cannot flip the numbers. They have a relationship that needs to occur, and it needs to stay where it is. You are changing the meaning of the ratio. The example listed is, what is the apple to pear ratio if there are 7 pears in 1 apple? So you write it out, 7 pears to 1 apple. If you were to change the numerical order, it would state 1 pear to 7 apples, and that would be completely wrong. For instance, in this class period right now, we have 1 Matt Curran to 3 other students. You don't say 1 student to 3 Matt Currans, because that is not there. You cannot change that up. All right, folks, ratios, overall, they just give us a better human understanding of relationships. And they're found in levers, mechanical advantage, cooking, and like in our board work, odds. Pretty much ratios are everywhere, and we'll touch more base on them when we move into mechanical advantage, and definitely gear ratio in rotary motion. And now that we've broken down ratios, you'll be able to tackle these tasks. All right.